The Deathworlder Fleet was drifting through the calm emptiness of space, its ships dark against the backdrop of distant stars. The crew was used to silence. For most Deathworlders, silence meant peace. But for Commander Ralvik, silence always felt like the calm before a storm. His instincts told him something was about to happen, and instincts were rarely wrong for someone who had survived the harsh conditions of a death world. The command deck of the flagship Iron Resolve was busy with activity. Crew members monitored scanners and systems, their faces tense with focus. They were a mix of species, all united by their shared origin from harsh, unforgiving planets. They were survivors, warriors, and protectors. No matter the challenge, the Deathworlders stood together. Then it happened. "Commander, we're picking up a signal," a young officer shouted, breaking the silence. Her voice was shaky, almost unsure. Ralvik turned sharply. "What kind of signal?" The officer hesitated, her fingers dancing over her console. "It's faint, almost drowned out by static. It's coming from Sector 47 Gamma, but it's weak. Could be a distress call." "Could be, or is." Ralvik's voice was sharp. He didn't like uncertainty. The officer took a deep breath, adjusted her earpiece, and played the signal on the ship's speakers. The bridge filled with a faint, broken transmission. The words were difficult to make out, distorted by distance and interference, but the emotion behind them was clear: fear and desperation. "Please, help us. Under attack." "Can't." The voice cut off abruptly, leaving only static. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Distress signals in deep space weren't uncommon, but they were rarely this vague. And Sector 47 Gamma, that was uncharted territory, a dangerous region avoided by most fleets. Ralvik's second-in-command, Lieutenant Drex, stepped forward. "Could be a trap," he said bluntly. His towering frame and sharp, reptilian features made him an intimidating figure, but his tone carried genuine concern. "We don't know who sent it or what's waiting for us out there." Ralvik nodded, considering. "True, but if it's not a trap, then someone out there needs our help. We can't just ignore it." Drex's eyes narrowed. "Commander, we're a fleet, not a rescue team. Our priority is the safety of our crew." "And what's the point of our strength?" Ralvik countered, "if we don't use it to protect those who can't protect themselves." The bridge fell silent. The crew respected Ralvik, not just because he was their commander, but because he always stood by his principles. He wasn't the type to abandon someone in need, no matter the risk. "Plot a course to Sector 47 Gamma," Ralvik ordered. The navigation officer hesitated. "Sir, that sector is uncharted. It's marked as high-risk territory in the galactic database. We could run into anything out there: black holes, rogue asteroids, or worse." Ralvik's expression hardened. "We've faced worse before. Get us there." The fleet began its journey into the unknown. As the ships moved deeper into Sector 47 Gamma, the atmosphere grew tense. The stars outside seemed dimmer, the space darker, as if the void itself were trying to warn them away. "Commander," Drex said, breaking the silence, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures in the sector. Could be natural phenomena, or something else." "Keep scanning," Ralvik replied. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Hours passed, and the faint signal grew stronger. The words became clearer, though still broken. "They're here, destroying everything. We can't hold them off. Please." The voice sounded more desperate than before, filled with terror. Then came a sound that sent chills through the crew, a low, guttural roar, followed by the unmistakable noise of weapons fire. "Commander," the communications officer exclaimed, "the signal's coming from a small colony. They're under attack." Ralvik's jaw tightened. "Can you pinpoint their location?" "Almost, sir. But there's something else. You need to see this." The officer brought up a visual feed from their long-range scanners. On the main screen, a blurry image appeared. It showed a small cluster of structures on a barren planet, surrounded by smoke and fire. Above the colony, several large ships hovered, their silhouettes dark and menacing. Ralvik recognized the design immediately. "Drazik Empire," he said, his voice low and grim. "Slavers and warlords." The crew stiffened. The Drazik were infamous across the galaxy for their brutality. They targeted the weak, enslaving entire species and destroying anything that resisted. "We have to move fast," Ralvik said. "Drazik ships don't leave survivors." "Commander, this could still be a trap," Drex warned. "The Drazik are clever. They might be using the distress signal to lure us in." Ralvik met Drex's gaze, his expression resolute. "If it's a trap, we'll spring it. But if we don't act, those people down there will die. And I won't let that happen on my watch." The crew prepared for battle. Weapons were armed, shields powered up, and battle stations manned. The Deathworlder Fleet had faced countless dangers before, but this mission felt different. The odds were unknown, and the stakes were high. As the fleet approached the colony, Ralvik made one final announcement to his crew. "We are Deathworlders. We don't run from danger. We are the shield for those who cannot defend themselves. Whatever's waiting for us out there, we face it together." The crew roared in agreement, their resolve unshaken. The Iron Resolve and its fleet entered orbit around the colony. On the screen, the Drazik ships loomed large, their weapons aimed at the planet below. Ralvik's voice rang out across the bridge. "Prepare to engage. Let's show the galaxy what it means to be a Deathworlder." The story ended here, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats, eager to see what would happen next. The Deathworlder Fleet emerged from hyperspace into the uncharted region of Sector 47 Gamma. The view outside the ships was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the usual vast emptiness, the region was cluttered with floating debris, shattered asteroid fields, and a faint eerie glow from distant, dying stars. It felt as if this part of the galaxy had been abandoned for centuries, left to decay and rot in silence. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Commander Ralvik stood at the helm, his sharp eyes scanning the sector map on the main screen. The distress signal was stronger now, coming from a barren planet just a few light minutes ahead. But something was wrong. "Commander, I'm detecting an abnormal energy field around the planet," reported Lieutenant Drex, his reptilian features darkened with suspicion. "It's interfering with our long-range scans. We won't know what's waiting for us until we're practically in its orbit." Ralvik frowned but gave a curt nod. "Proceed with caution. All ships, maintain defensive formations. Be ready for anything." The fleet moved slowly, like a pack of predators stalking unknown territory. As they closed in on the planet, the faint static of the distress signal was replaced by clearer, more desperate cries. "They're here, destroying everything. Please help us." The voice trembled with terror, followed by the unmistakable sound of explosions and weapons fire. Then silence. "Commander, the signal just went dead," said the communications officer. "I'm trying to re-establish a connection." "Too late," Drex muttered grimly. "We're about to see what's happening firsthand." As the planet came into view, the bridge erupted into activity. The main screen displayed the surface of the planet, a barren wasteland dotted with small structures that had once been a colony. Now it was a war zone. Fires raged across the settlement, and towering plumes of smoke curled into the thin atmosphere. Above the colony, 3 massive Drazik warships hovered like vultures, their dark hulls illuminated by the glow of destruction below. Ralvik's jaw tightened. "Drazik Empire," he said, the words dripping with disdain. No wonder the signal was so desperate. The Drazik were notorious across the galaxy. Slavers, marauders, and destroyers. They preyed on the weak, leaving only ruins in their wake. For them, a defenseless colony like this was easy pickings. "Enemy ships are locking onto us." "Commander," Drex said, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "Their weapons are charging." Raise shields and prepare for combat, Ralvik ordered. All ships, hold position. Let's see if they make the first move. The Deathworlder Fleet formed a defensive line, their ships bristling with weaponry. Unlike the sleek, high-tech vessels of other galactic powers, Deathworlder ships were built for endurance. Their thick armor and brutal designs reflected the harsh worlds they came from. They weren't built to intimidate. They were built to survive. On the screen, the Drazak warships began to shift. Smaller fighter crafts swarmed out of their docking bays, buzzing toward the Deathworlder fleet like angry hornets. "Commander, they're coming in hot," warned the tactical officer. 50 fighters and counting. Their main ships are holding back. For now. Ralvik's mind raced. The Drazak weren't fools. They were testing the Deathworlders, trying to gauge their strength. But Ralvik wasn't about to let them take the upper hand. "All ships, target the incoming fighters. Focus fire and keep them off our flanks," he commanded. "Let's show them what they're dealing with." The fleet sprang into action. Turrets roared to life, filling the void with streaks of bright plasma and railgun slugs. The Deathworlder ships moved with precision, their crews working in perfect harmony. The first wave of Drazak fighters was shredded in moments, their debris scattering into the darkness. But the Drazak weren't deterred. More fighters poured out, faster and more aggressive. They darted around the larger ships, looking for weaknesses to exploit. One managed to slip past the fleet's defenses, heading straight for the iron resolve. "Braced for impact," shouted Drex as the fighter fired a barrage of plasma bolts at the flagship's hull. The ship shuddered, but the thick armor held firm. "Return fire," Ralvik ordered, his voice calm but firm. The iron resolve's main turret swiveled and fired a single shot. The Drazak fighter exploded in a burst of light, leaving nothing behind but fragments. "Commander, the Drazak warships are moving," the tactical officer reported. "They're bringing their main guns online." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. "Good. Let them come." The Drazak warships advanced, their massive cannons glowing with lethal energy. The Deathworlders held their ground, ready to meet the attack head-on. But just as the enemy ships opened fire, something unexpected happened. "Commander, we're picking up a new signal," the communications officer exclaimed. "It's coming from the planet." Ralvik's brow furrowed. "What kind of signal?" "It's strange," the officer said, adjusting his console. "It's not a distress call. It's a broadcast." The main screen flickered, and a new image appeared. It showed a small group of alien creatures huddled together in the ruins of the colony. They were frail and trembling, their large, luminous eyes filled with fear. One of them stepped forward, a child, holding a strange, glowing device. "They're trying to communicate with us," the officer said, "but the transmission is weak. I can't make out what they're saying." Ralvik stared at the screen, his mind racing. These creatures were defenseless, barely able to stand, let alone fight. Yet they held on to hope, even as the Drazak closed in around them. "Commander," Drex said, his voice low, "we can't fight the Drazak and protect the colony at the same time. We need to choose." Ralvik's eyes burned with determination. "Then we'll do both." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but none of them questioned him. They were Deathworlders, after all. They didn't back down from a fight, especially when lives were on the line. Ralvik turned to the tactical officer. "Prepare the fleet for a split maneuver. Half will engage the Drazak head-on. The rest will descend to the surface and secure the colony." "Yes, Commander." As the fleet moved into position, Ralvik took one last look at the fragile creatures on the screen. "Hang on," he whispered. "We're coming." The Deathworlder fleet roared into action, splitting into two groups just as Commander Ralvik had ordered. The larger half of the fleet engaged the Drazak warships, their powerful weapons firing in synchronized bursts. Meanwhile, a smaller contingent, including the Iron Resolve, began its descent toward the planet's surface to protect the fragile colony. The battlefield was a chaotic blend of lights and explosions. Drazak fighters swarmed like angry bees, weaving between the massive ships, searching for vulnerabilities. But the Deathworlder fleet was ready. Their turrets tracked the agile enemies with pinpoint precision, tearing through the swarms with brutal efficiency. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Ralvik's focus was unshaken. He watched the tactical display as his ships held the line against the overwhelming Drazic forces. The Deathworlders fought not with desperation, but with calculated ferocity. Every shot was deliberate, every maneuver executed with purpose. "Commander, we've got multiple breaches in our outer formation," Lieutenant Drex reported. His claws tapped rapidly at the console as he analyzed the situation. "2 ships are taking heavy fire." Ralvik nodded. "Order them to fall back and regroup. The rest of the fleet will cover them." "Yes, sir." As the fleet fought fiercely in orbit, the Iron Resolve and its escort ships broke through the planet's atmosphere. The view from the command deck was grim. The colony below was in ruins. Fires raged unchecked, and thick smoke curled into the sky. The once thriving settlement was now a battlefield littered with destruction. "Scan the area for survivors," Ralvik ordered. "We need to find those creatures before the Drazic do." The communications officer's hands moved swiftly over the controls. "I've got multiple life signs near the colony center. But there's a problem. Drazic ground forces are closing in on their location." Ralvik's fists tightened. The Drazic weren't just attacking from the air. They had already deployed troops to finish the job on the ground. The stakes had just risen. "Prepare the drop team," Ralvik commanded. "We're going down there." Drex turned to him, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "Commander, with all due respect, you're needed here on the ship. Let the ground teams handle the rescue." Ralvik's voice was steady but firm. "This mission is personal now. I won't ask my crew to do something I'm not willing to do myself." Drex hesitated but gave a sharp nod. "Understood, sir. I'll keep the ship ready to extract you." Minutes later, Ralvik and his team boarded the drop pods. The small, heavily armored vessels were designed for high-risk insertions, and this mission was no exception. As the pods launched, the crew braced for the violent descent. The ride was rough, shaking with turbulence as they tore through the planet's atmosphere. When the pods slammed into the ground, the doors burst open, and the Deathworlder soldiers poured out, weapons at the ready. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant sound of gunfire echoed through the ruins. Ralvik led the team through the devastated colony, his sharp eyes scanning for threats. The Drazic were everywhere, hulking brutes armed with plasma rifles, their dark armor reflecting the glow of the fires. They moved in squads, systematically destroying everything in their path. "Stay sharp," Ralvik said, his voice low but commanding. "We're not leaving until we find those survivors." The team moved quickly but cautiously, using the rubble for cover. As they approached the colony center, the sound of Drazic weapons grew louder. Ralvik raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. He peered around the corner of a shattered building and saw them, the Drazic soldiers advancing on a group of terrified creatures. The survivors were huddled together, their frail bodies trembling. Their large, luminous eyes darted around in fear as the Drazic closed in. One of them, a youngling clutching a strange, glowing device, seemed to be shielding the others with its small frame. Ralvik's jaw tightened. He turned to his team. "We're outnumbered, but we've got the element of surprise. Take out their heavy gunners first, on my signal." The soldiers nodded, their weapons locked and ready. Ralvik counted down silently, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, with a sharp hand signal, the Deathworlders attacked. The first shots were precise and deadly. The Drazic heavy gunners fell before they even realized they were under attack. Chaos erupted as the remaining Drazic scrambled for cover, firing wildly in every direction. The Deathworlders pressed their advantage, their superior tactics and firepower overwhelming the enemy. Ralvik moved with practiced precision, his plasma rifle taking down targets with deadly accuracy. He led his team toward the survivors, shielding them from enemy fire. One Drazic soldier, larger than the rest, charged at Ralvik with a roaring battle cry. But the commander didn't flinch. With a swift move, he sidestepped the attack and delivered a powerful strike with his rifle, sending the brute crashing to the ground. "Area secure," shouted one of the soldiers as the last Drazik fell. Ralvik turned to the survivors, lowering his weapon. The creatures looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. The youngling still clutched the glowing device, holding it out as if offering it to Ralvik. "It's okay," Ralvik said gently, his tone soft despite the intensity of the situation. "We're here to help." The youngling hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. The glowing device pulsed faintly, emitting a strange hum. Ralvik could sense that it was more than just a tool. It was important, perhaps even the reason the Drazik had attacked this colony in the first place. "Commander, we've got incoming," a soldier shouted. More Drazik forces closing in from the west. Ralvik's expression hardened. "We're out of time. Get the survivors to the extraction point. I'll hold them off." "Sir, you can't," the soldier began, but Ralvik cut him off with a glare. "Move, that's an order." As the team escorted the survivors to safety, Ralvik turned to face the approaching Drazik forces. He tightened his grip on his rifle, his resolve unshaken. The Deathworlders never ran from a fight, and Ralvik wasn't about to start now. The extraction point was a scene of controlled chaos. Deathworlder soldiers worked quickly to fortify the area as the survivors were brought in, their fragile forms trembling from exhaustion and fear. Commander Ralvik arrived moments later, his armor scorched and his rifle still smoking from the battle. He scanned the group of survivors, his sharp eyes searching for the glowing device he'd seen earlier. "Status report," he barked. Lieutenant Drex's voice came through over the comms. "Fleet's holding, but the Drazik are throwing everything at us. They know we're protecting something important." Ralvik turned his attention to the youngling who had clutched the glowing device during the rescue. The creature, barely half his height, looked up at him with wide, luminous eyes. Its tiny hands still gripped the device tightly, as though letting go would mean certain doom. Ralvik crouched down, speaking softly. "What is that? Why are they after it?" The youngling hesitated, then let out a series of melodic, chirping sounds. One of the Deathworlder linguists nearby worked to interpret the message, their handheld translator buzzing with effort. It's a key, Commander," the linguist finally said, her voice filled with astonishment. "A key to something ancient, something powerful." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. "What kind of key?" The linguist listened as the youngling chirped again, its tones rising and falling in urgency. She paled as she translated. "A key to an ancient defense system, built by a long-extinct civilization. The Luminids, these creatures, are the only ones who can activate it. The Drazik want it because it could give them control over the galaxy's most powerful weapon." Ralvik felt a chill run through him. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything he'd anticipated. "Where is this system located?" The youngling pointed toward the horizon, where jagged mountains loomed in the distance. The linguist translated again. "It's hidden in the mountains, buried deep underground. The Luminids have been its guardians for generations." Ralvik stood, his mind racing. If the Drazik get their hands on this, they'll use it to dominate every corner of the galaxy. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "Commander, we can't let that happen. We need to destroy it before they do." Ralvik shook his head. "No, if it's a defense system, we need to secure it, not destroy it. It could be the galaxy's best hope against threats like the Drazik." Before he could issue the next command, the ground shook violently. Explosions erupted in the distance, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Over the comms, Drex's voice was urgent. "Commander, the Drazik have deployed reinforcements. They're targeting the extraction point and the surrounding area. We're running out of time." Ralvik turned to his team. "We need to move. Split into 2 groups. One will escort the Luminids to the mountains, and the other will hold off the Drazik." "I'll take the defensive team," said Sergeant Kara, a seasoned Deathworlder known for her bravery and sharp instincts. You get that key to where it needs to go, Commander. Ralvik hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Understood. Hold them off as long as you can. We'll be back with reinforcements. As the group split, Ralvik led the Luminids and a small escort toward the mountains. The journey was treacherous, the terrain rocky and uneven. The youngling holding the glowing device struggled to keep up, but Ralvik slowed his pace, his protective instincts kicking in. "We're almost there," he said, his voice steady. "Just a little further." Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder. The Drazik were relentless, their forces pressing hard against the Deathworlder defenses. Explosions lit up the sky, and the distant cries of battle sent shivers through the Luminids. Finally, they reached the entrance to the mountain, a narrow, hidden passage partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. The youngling stepped forward, holding the device up to a seemingly ordinary rock face. The device pulsed, emitting a faint hum, and the rock began to shift, revealing a hidden doorway. Ralvik motioned for his team to secure the entrance. "Inside, quickly. We don't know how long we have." The group entered a vast, ancient chamber carved into the mountain. The walls were lined with strange symbols that glowed faintly, casting eerie light across the space. At the center of the chamber was a massive console, its surface covered in intricate patterns and alien text. The youngling approached the console, placing the glowing device into a slot at its center. The room vibrated as the console came to life, lights flickering and holograms projecting into the air. The linguist gasped as she read the symbols. "This isn't just a defense system," she said, her voice trembling. "It's an AI, an ancient intelligence designed to protect the galaxy from existential threats." Ralvik stepped closer. "Can it stop the Drazik?" The linguist hesitated. "It can, but only if it's fully activated. The process will take time, and we'll need to defend this location until it's complete." As if on cue, the comms crackled with Drex's voice. "Commander, the Drazik have breached our outer defenses. They're heading your way." Ralvik's jaw tightened. He turned to his team. "Fortify the entrance. We're making our stand here." The soldiers nodded, their expressions grim but determined. The Luminids huddled together, their glowing eyes filled with both hope and fear. The youngling looked up at Ralvik, chirping softly. The linguist translated. "They're thanking you, Commander. They believe in you." Ralvik nodded, placing a reassuring hand on the youngling's shoulder. "We'll protect you, no matter what it takes." As the sound of Drazik forces echoed through the mountains, the Deathworlders prepared for battle. Ralvik stood at the forefront, his rifle at the ready, his resolve unshaken. The hidden truth of the Luminid secret had changed everything. But one thing remained clear: the Deathworlders would fight to the last to defend the defenseless. The air inside the mountain chamber was thick with tension. The ancient AI system had come to life, its humming vibrations filling the vast space. The holographic displays floated in the air, flickering with alien symbols and complex diagrams that none of the Deathworlders could fully understand. Outside, the sounds of the approaching Drazik forces grew louder, echoing through the rocky passageways like a drumbeat of doom. Commander Ralvik stood near the entrance, surveying his team's preparations. Makeshift barricades were being reinforced, and every soldier was armed to the teeth. The Luminids, fragile and terrified, stayed huddled together in the far corner of the chamber, their luminous eyes reflecting the dim light. "Commander," Lieutenant Drex's voice came through the comms, sharp and urgent. "The Drazik have deployed siege units, heavy walkers and artillery. They're not just trying to break through. They're planning to flatten the entire mountain." Ralvik's jaw tightened. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes at best," Drex replied. "They're coming in hard and fast." Ralvik turned to the linguist, who was frantically working with the Luminids to communicate with the ancient AI. "How much longer until the system is fully activated?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I don't know. This technology is beyond anything I've seen." The Luminids are doing their best, but the process is delicate. If we rush it, we risk shutting it down entirely. Ralvik's fist clenched. The weight of the decision fell heavily on his shoulders. They couldn't hold off the Drazik forever, not against siege units, and retreat was no longer an option. If the AI wasn't activated in time, the galaxy would lose its best chance at a defense against the Drazik and any future threats. As the team worked to secure the chamber, Sergeant Kara approached Ralvik. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "Commander, I have an idea." Ralvik turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Let's hear it." Kara motioned toward the holographic display, where a map of the mountain's network of tunnels was projected. "The Drazik are funneling their forces through the main passage. If we set up a decoy and lure their siege units deeper into the mountain, we can buy the AI more time to activate." Ralvik studied the map. "That's a solid plan, but it's dangerous. Whoever sets the decoy will be cut off. They won't make it back." Kara nodded, her voice steady. "I know. That's why I'll do it." Ralvik's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. I won't sacrifice one of my best soldiers." Kara's lips twitched into a faint smile. "With all due respect, Commander, this isn't about sacrifice. It's about survival. The Luminids need that AI, and the galaxy needs the Luminids. If buying them a few more minutes costs me my life, it's a price I'm willing to pay." Ralvik stared at her, his heart heavy. He had seen bravery before, but Kara's resolve was something else entirely. She wasn't acting out of duty or pride. She was acting out of pure selflessness. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. Kara nodded. "I've made peace with it. Besides, I've always wanted to see how many Drazik I could take down on my own." Ralvik gave a reluctant nod. "Very well. You have my permission. But if there's any chance at all, you make it back." Kara saluted, her expression unshaken. "Understood, sir." She gathered her gear quickly, strapping on additional explosives and rigging a remote decoy beacon. The rest of the team watched in silence, their faces grim. They knew what this meant, but none of them tried to stop her. They respected her choice. Before she left, Kara turned to the Luminids, her gaze softening. "Take care of that eye," she said. "The galaxy's going to need it." The youngling with the glowing device chirped softly, stepping forward to touch Kara's hand. The linguist translated. They said, "Thank you for everything." Kara smiled, then turned and headed toward the tunnel. Her footsteps echoed briefly before fading into the distance. The minutes that followed were agonizing. The sounds of the Drazik forces grew louder, and the mountain shook with the impact of their weapons. Then, through the comms, Kara's voice came through, calm and steady. "Decoys in place. I've drawn their attention. They're moving deeper into the tunnels." Ralvik closed his eyes briefly, a silent prayer on his lips. "Good work, Sergeant. Stay safe." "Not making any promises," Kara replied, her voice light despite the gravity of the situation. "Give those Drazik hell for me." The comms went silent, but moments later, the ground shook violently. Explosions echoed through the mountain, and the sounds of Drazik forces faltered. Kara had succeeded in luring them away, but the cost was clear. Back in the chamber, the ancient AI systems whirred to life. The holograms grew brighter, and the symbols rearranged themselves into a coherent interface. The Luminids worked quickly, their delicate hands moving with practiced precision. "It's almost ready," the linguist said, her voice filled with both relief and urgency. "Just a few more moments." Ralvik nodded, his grip on his rifle tightening. The Drazik forces would regroup, and when they did, the Deathworlders would be ready. Kara's sacrifice had bought them precious time, and now it was up to the rest of the team to see the mission through. As the AI began to emit a low, resonating hum, Ralvik stood at the entrance, his gaze fixed on the distant glow of Drazik weapons fire. He raised his rifle, his voice steady and unwavering. "For Kara," he said, and for the galaxy. The chamber hummed with power as the ancient AI system continued its activation process. The holograms that floated above the console began to take shape, forming what appeared to be a map of the galaxy. Energy pulses radiated outward, signifying the AI's slow but steady awakening. The Luminids worked tirelessly, their delicate hands gliding over the console, communicating in melodic tones with the system that only they could understand. Ralvik stood at the entrance to the chamber, his rifle gripped tightly. The ground beneath him trembled as distant explosions shook the mountain. The Drazic forces were regrouping after Kara's decoy maneuver, and this time, they wouldn't be so easily delayed. They were coming with everything they had. "Commander, the AI is at 85% activation," the linguist called out. "But the process is accelerating. We need to hold them off for just a few more minutes." Ralvik nodded grimly. "Understood. All units, prepare for the final wave." The soldiers snapped to attention, reinforcing the barricades and positioning themselves for the inevitable assault. Despite their grim circumstances, the Deathworlders showed no fear. They were warriors from the harshest planets in the galaxy, and this was what they were born to do. A faint sound echoed through the tunnels, growing louder with each passing second. The rhythmic march of Drazic troops, the rumble of their heavy walkers, and the metallic clinking of weapons being readied. The enemy was close. "Contacts," one of the soldiers shouted, multiple heat signatures approaching fast. Ralvik activated his comms. "Lieutenant Drex, report." Drex's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and urgent. "The fleet is holding, but barely. We're outnumbered 10-1 up here. If that AI doesn't come online soon, we won't have anything left to protect." Ralvik's jaw tightened. "We'll hold the line. Do whatever it takes to keep the Drazic off our backs." He turned to his team. "This is it. We don't let them past us. Not one step. The Luminids are depending on us, and so is the rest of the galaxy." The soldiers nodded, their expressions resolute. They knew the odds were against them, but surrender wasn't in their nature. They would fight to the last breath if that's what it took. Moments later, the first wave of Drazic forces appeared. Their hulking forms filled the tunnel, plasma rifles glowing menacingly in the dim light. Behind them, the ominous silhouettes of heavy walkers loomed, their mechanical legs clanking as they advanced. "Hold your fire," Ralvik ordered, waiting for the perfect moment. His sharp eyes tracked the enemy, calculating their movements. The Drazic surged forward, their guttural war cries echoing through the cavern. Ralvik raised his fist, then brought it down sharply. "Fire!" The tunnel exploded with light and sound as the Deathworlders unleashed their fury. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs tore through the air, striking the Drazic with brutal precision. The enemy's front line crumbled under the onslaught, but more kept coming. "Focus fire on the walkers," Ralvik shouted. "Take out their heavy units first." The soldiers adjusted their aim, targeting the towering machines. One of the walkers stumbled as a railgun round struck its joint, sending it crashing to the ground. The explosion lit up the tunnel, but the victory was short-lived. Two more walkers advanced to take its place. Ralvik's heart pounded as he fired shot after shot, each one finding its mark. The Deathworlders were holding, but the Drazic were relentless. For every enemy they took down, two more seemed to take its place. Suddenly, the comms crackled with a new voice, one of the soldiers stationed near the rear. "Commander, we've got movement behind us." Ralvik's stomach dropped. The Drazic had found another way into the mountain. They were flanking the chamber. "Squad 3, fall back and secure the rear entrance," Ralvik ordered. "Don't let them surround us." As the squad moved to intercept the flanking force, Ralvik's focus returned to the main assault. The Drazic were pressing harder, their heavy fire chipping away at the barricades. He knew they couldn't hold much longer. "Commander, the AI is at 95%, the linguist shouted. "Just a little more time." Ralvik's grip on his rifle tightened. "We're not leaving until it's done." The battle raged on. the Deathworlders fighting with everything they had. Despite their determination, the sheer number of Drazic forces began to take its toll. Soldiers fell one by one, their sacrifices buying precious seconds for the AI to complete its activation. Through the chaos, Ralvik's mind flashed to Kara. Her voice echoed in his memory, calm and resolute. "If buying them a few more minutes costs me my life, it's a price I'm willing to pay." He couldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. "Commander, we're through." Squad 3's leader called over the comms. "Rear flank is neutralized." Ralvik allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. A deafening roar filled the chamber as one of the Drazic walkers fired its main cannon, obliterating a section of the barricade. "Fall back to the console," Ralvik ordered. "Protect the Luminids at all costs." The remaining soldiers regrouped around the console, forming a tight defensive line. The Drazic pushed forward, their weapons blazing. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of plasma burns. Then, just as the situation seemed hopeless, the AI emitted a loud, resonating hum. The hologram stabilized, and the entire chamber was bathed in a brilliant light. The Luminids stepped back, their work complete. "It's online," the linguist shouted. "The AI is fully activated." Ralvik turned to the console, his voice firm. "Can it stop them?" The linguist hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but we need to give it a clear directive." Ralvik didn't hesitate. "AI, activate all defensive systems. Neutralize the Drazic forces immediately." The AI responded with a low, mechanical voice, its tones alien but authoritative. The chamber vibrated as ancient mechanisms came to life. Outside, the ground shook as hidden turrets and drones emerged from the mountain, firing on the Drazic with deadly precision. The tide of battle turned instantly. The Drazic forces were caught off guard, their numbers decimated by the AI's overwhelming firepower. Within moments, the assault was broken, and the surviving enemies retreated in disarray. As the dust settled, Ralvik lowered his rifle, exhaustion washing over him. The mountain was silent once more, save for the faint hum of the AI. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "Kara, we held the line." The surviving Deathworlders gathered around the console, their faces weary but triumphant. The Luminids chirped softly, their gratitude evident. Ralvik looked at the youngling with the glowing device, offering a faint smile. "You have your system. Now let's make sure it never falls into the wrong hands again." The battlefield had fallen silent. Outside the mountain, the last remnants of the Drazic forces flood into the void of space, their morale shattered by the devastating precision of the ancient AI's automated defenses. The once mighty invaders were reduced to scattered survivors, their warships retreating in chaos as the Deathworlder Fleet rallied to secure the skies above. Inside the mountain chamber, the Deathworlders and the Luminids stood together, surrounded by the faint hum of the activated AI. The console projected a galaxy-wide hologram, its bright lines forming star systems, planets, and trade routes. Pulses of energy radiated outward from the mountain, signaling the system's readiness to connect with allied networks across the galaxy. Commander Ralvik stood at the forefront, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The cost had been high, and the weight of the sacrifices made pressed heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at the surviving soldiers, their faces streaked with dirt and weariness, and then at the Luminids, their large luminous eyes filled with gratitude and hope. "It's over," Lieutenant Drex said, stepping up beside Ralvik. His reptilian features were unusually solemn. "For now." Ralvik nodded, his gaze fixed on the hologram. "We've won the battle, but the war isn't over. The Drazic will regroup, and others will come. This galaxy is full of enemies who see weakness as an opportunity." Drex folded his arms. "Then we make sure they never see weakness again." Ralvik turned to the Luminids. The youngling who had carried the glowing device stepped forward, its small frame trembling slightly, but its resolve evident. It reached out, placing its tiny hand on Ralvik's. The linguist translated the melodic chirps. They say, "Thank you. You've saved not just us but countless others. They want to know how they can repay you." Ralvik crouched to meet the youngling's gaze. "You don't owe us anything," he said softly. "But if you want to help, use this system wisely. Protect the innocent. Make sure no one else has to go through what you've endured." The Luminid chirped again, its tone solemn and determined. The linguist interpreted. "They promise. They will use the AI to safeguard the galaxy, not as a weapon, but as a shield." As the Luminids began integrating their knowledge with the AI, the soldiers gathered around Ralvik, the weight of their losses evident in their silence. Sergeant Kara's absence was felt keenly. Her bravery had turned the tide of the battle, but the cost of her sacrifice lingered like a shadow over their victory. Ralvik turned to his team. Kara gave everything to make this possible. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a reminder of what we stand for: courage, sacrifice, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. The soldiers nodded, their expressions a mix of pride and grief. One of them stepped forward, holding a small device that Kara had carried, a personal holo recorder. With trembling hands, they activated it. A projection of Kara appeared, her familiar smirk lighting up the chamber. "If you're seeing this," Kara's recorded voice said, "it means I didn't make it back. Don't waste time grieving. Remember why we fight. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for hope. For a galaxy where people like the Luminids can live without fear. That's all I ever wanted. Don't let that dream die." The projection faded, leaving the room in a heavy silence. Ralvik clenched his fists, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We won't let it die." The soldiers responded with a unified roar, their voices echoing through the chamber. The Luminids watched, their glowing eyes filled with admiration for the Deathworlders' unyielding spirit. Moments later, the AI emitted a series of deep tones. The hologram shifted, displaying connections forming across the galaxy. Allied systems responded, their signals lighting up the map like stars in the night sky. Messages of gratitude and unity poured in from distant planets and space stations, each one a testament to the hope the Deathworlders had rekindled. "This is bigger than us now," Drex said, his tone uncharacteristically soft. "We've given the galaxy something to believe in again." Ralvik nodded. "And we'll keep fighting for it. As long as there's a need, the Deathworlders will be there." The AI's voice, low and resonant, echoed through the chamber. Though alien in tone, its message was clear: system secure. Galactic defensive protocols initiated. Peace maintained through unity. The Luminids chirped softly, their melodies carrying a sense of relief and gratitude. The youngling approached Ralvik one last time, bowing its small head in a gesture of respect. Ralvik placed a hand on its shoulder, his expression softening. "You're safe now," he said. "But remember, safety isn't just something to hold on to. It's something to share." With the Drazic forces routed, the Deathworlder Fleet began regrouping. The wounded were tended to, the fallen honored, and the ships prepared for their next mission. As the Iron Resolve ascended from the planet's surface, Ralvik took one last look at the Luminid colony below. Smoke still lingered in the air, but amid the ruins, there was movement, rebuilding, and hope. Back on the bridge, Drex turned to Ralvik. "So, what's next, Commander?" Ralvik's lips curved into a faint smile. "We keep moving forward. The galaxy's a big place, and there's always someone out there who needs help. We'll find them." As the fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving the war-torn planet behind, Ralvik allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. They had faced impossible odds, suffered great losses, and uncovered a secret that could change the fate of the galaxy. Yet through it all, they had remained true to their purpose, protecting the defenseless and standing against the darkness. The holographic map of the galaxy flickered on the bridge, showing the newly formed network of allied systems. Ralvik's gaze lingered on it, his heart heavy but resolute. The Deathworlders had given the galaxy more than just a victory. They had given it a chance. And as long as there was breath in his lungs, Ralvik knew he would continue to fight for that chance. Not for glory, not for power, but for the simple, unwavering belief that even the harshest worlds could foster hope.